All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Digitech Zeal. Before we start, I would like us to introduce ourselves. Let me start with David Musa. So, David Musa, you kindly unmute and tell us your name and where you are joining this session from. Musa,
I'm David
okay,
Musa from. Can you hear me?
we are with you.
I'm David Musa from Abuja, FCT.
Okay, you are welcome. You are joining from
Thank you.
Abuja FCT. Welcome to the
Ye-
GTC Hub.
Thank
Right.
you, sir.
Okay, so if I can hear from one more person as well before we commence the training properly. Can I hear from the next person there? I don't know if the person can actually hear me. All right. Uh,
All right.
good evening once
Good
again.
evening.
Welcome to Digital Z Hub. Before we dive into the training section, I would like to give us some information about this platform. I want to officially welcome every one of us to Digital Z Hub. Just to give us these details, Digital Z Hub is an online live tech training platform. So what we do here is we offer quality and affordable training programs such as cybersecurity, data analytics, web development, digital marketing, AutoCAD, programming using Python, programming using JavaScript, programming using PHP, and they will also train on graphic design. So there are a whole lot of programs you can actually learn from us here at Digital Z Hub. We also train on video and photo editing. So all these are programs you can actually subscribe into, and we can guarantee you that you will not regret for registering with us. Okay, so tonight we are in for a master class section. This is training on understanding the basic computing. Training, understanding basic computing. So tonight we happen to be the day one. This is going to run for about 12 classes. So we are just starting with day one in this session. And our objective is to give us a very strong foundation regarding to the computer approach for the very first time. So like we advertise, we expect that everybody that have joined this section falls under computer beginners. These are people who are breaking into technology for the very first time. So that is the objective of this training. Now, we did a research and we discovered that there are a whole lot of persons that venture into technology or learning computer program, but they lack certain fundamental skills. So as a result of that, most of them are actually struggling. Most of them are finding it difficult to cope with the advanced aspects of it that they have probably registered into without proper guardians. And that is why we came up with this training package within this summer period. Like I said, this training is going to run for 12 weeks. Sorry, I think it should be 6 weeks. And then we have total number of 12 classes, including tonight section. Though we actually open the line for people to join this very session free. But we have individuals that have registered to follow through all the 12 classes. So like I have already mentioned in the group that we are in, so at the end of this training, if you find it interesting and you find out that you are supposed to be in these 12 classes, you can reach out to me directly with the number displayed on the screen for you to register so that you can join them in the subsequent classes. All right, Mr. Clement, welcome. We would also like you to tell us your name and where you are connecting from. Okay, if that is possible. So I also have Sylvia and Ikwe joining. Please, those of you that are just joining, if you don't mind, you can just unmute, tell us your name and where you are connecting from. I have Sylvia and Ikwe. Sorry if I'm not getting that name. I have Clement. Musa has introduced himself earlier. Okay, so let me assume that you cannot hear me. Sylvia, can you hear me? And Mr. Clement, I know Mr. Clement is one of my Python class. I think I know him. Okay, so I may come back to you later for the introduction. Okay, so like I was saying, this training objective is to give us, okay, Mr. Clement is ready now. You can go ahead. Just quickly mention your name and where you are connecting from.
Yes, my name is Uchendu Clement. I'm
Okay.
connecting from Imo State, Owerri.
All right, you are welcome. Okay, so
Thank you.
let's continue. So I'm still giving us some important information about this training before we commence the training. So I understand that we joined a little bit late, though this training is scheduled to hold 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. according to the pool that we conducted in the group. So a lot of us suggested you should hold between this hour. I guess most of them are working class. Okay, so because of our time, I may come back to giving us this information maybe towards the end so that we can utilize the time for the training. Okay, so please, while the training is going on, I want to beg us to make sure that we remain muted to avoid sound conflicts. Perhaps you have someone while the class is going on that you feel that they should be here. Please feel free to share the Zoom link with them to connect. All right, so let's dive in. Tonight, my assignment is very simple. I'm going to introduce us to the computer itself properly.
What are you writing? So where is the
So introducing us to computer properly. So like I said, I'm assuming that every one of us that I have in this section, please can we mute our mic to avoid distraction, please? Okay. So thank you very much, everyone. I'm trying to mute River Abigail, please. If you can help me to mute over there to avoid the sound conflicts, I will appreciate that. Okay, so let's quickly dive in. My objective tonight, I would like you to take note of this topic, because I'm going to walk us through this topic as the D1. Remember, like I said, for those that are just joining, this is a master class training that is going to run for 6 weeks and is going to run twice in a week. That will give us total number of 12 classes. And these 12 classes are expected to expose us to the computer foundation or fundamentals, starting from computer appreciation, which is an aspect I'm going to focus on in this session, and then advancing to Microsoft Windows management. And then after that, we look at mastering Microsoft Office applications like Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. And then finally, we will now end the training with how to use the internet for research purpose and also learning how to manage emails. All right, so that is the scope of the training. So it's a master class. This is the only free session. After this session, if you want to register to continue to have the timetable for the classes, you have the number displayed on the screen. You can directly WhatsApp me. Please, we appeal that you connect us to other individuals around you that need this training, particularly the kids that are on holiday, the teenager. This is a perfect training for them. All right, let them understand the basis of the computer before eventually diving into the advanced aspect. A lot of adults have actually made this mistake. Like I share with the batch A, this is batch B. I told them that I've graduated a lot of students on cybersecurity, data analytics, programming, web development, but I discovered that a lot of them struggles. They struggle, I mean struggle, particularly some adults. Just imagine you want to train someone on web development, a professional program. The person cannot create a folder. So you just have to suspend the program and start putting the person through on some of the basic things that we are going to settle in this training. This is the perfect way of breaking into technology. Don't let anybody deceive you. I know there are some individuals that will just say prior knowledge is not needed for you to enroll into cybersecurity. That is a capital lie. They are just somehow focusing on the money they want to get. They will have told you the truth. The truth is just like you entering university without understanding or without going through a primary school, secondary school. You and I know that you are going to struggle with the first semester. That is just the bitter truth. And that is what actually inspired us at Digitech Hub to come up with this training throughout this summer. Once I'm done with this summer season, the next advert you'll be seeing will be advanced, 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 not basic. And peradventure, anybody register into any of those advanced programs, I am going to link them back to watch these videos before they can proceed. All right, so my objective tonight is to look at the following topics so you can start writing. So the first topic we are going to look at, in fact, the whole topics that I'm going to discuss will be traced or zero under what? General computing, or let's say general introduction. General introduction to computer or computing. So under this, in other words, this is what some of us will tell you that it's called computer appreciation. So this is actually a subject under computing, which is called computer appreciation. So as we proceed, you will know why it's usually referred to as computer appreciation. So under this topic, under this main topic, we are going to look at the definition of computer. we are going to look at the definition. We are going to look at the definition of computer. Musa, you can still help me to remind those that have not joined from your paid group. So we are going to look at the definition of computer. Still under this topic, we are going to look at parts of computer. We are going to identify some very important parts that makes up what you call system or computer. So we are going to look at that part of computer. And then we are going to look at some of the advantages. We are going to look at some of the advantages of computer. All right, and then if the time permits us, we might step into introduction to Microsoft's Windows. That is if the time permits us. But if the time does not permit us, it means that that is going to form our day 2. So let's see how fast we can go with this topic. All right, so like I said, I'm assuming that everybody that have joined this session, they are just breaking into technology for the very first time. So for that reason, the training model is designed to address such persons. So peradventure you are here and you are familiar with any of this topic, just stay put. I believe you are still going to learn one or two things. We have to go this low so that we can get it right. All right, so let's start with the definition of computer. Computer can actually be defined from different perspectives depending on what you use it for, depending on what you do with it. All right, so don't be surprised you come across different definitions across different materials or from different tech experts. But tonight I'm going to give us a definition that highlights the operational cycle of computing or computer. So let me give us two definitions. The first definition, we can say a computer can be defined as an electronic device. I'm taking it slowly for those that are writing. A computer can be defined as an electronic device. So there are key words I want us to understand while I proceed with the definition. The first word is electronic. So I'm going to come back to look at these terms and tell us why they are used in describing computer. I said computer is an electronic device. So let me also highlight the word device. All right, that can accept data. Let me also highlight the word data, that can accept data. Now, in what form does it accept the data? How does it receive this data? So that will form the next word. Computer is an electronic device that accepts data as an input. So in other words, it receives this information as a result of you feeding it. So this information comes from you. And as we proceed, we are going to learn the devices or the units that are responsible for feeding the computer with what? The data. So let me continue with the definition. I hope we are taking note of the key words. I said computer is an electronic device that receives data as an input process the data. So let's look at the word process. Process the data. So that brings process or processor. So what you and I know today as processor is derived from the process of what? Using the computer. Okay, so let's take it again because I want us to really get it. Like I told you that I'm not in a hurry because this is not just one-time class. This is a master class that is going to run for 12 classes. So this is day one. So I want to make sure that I am not teaching us in hurry. All right. So a computer is an electronic device that receives data as input, comma, process those data with the help of a processor, and then outputs the end result. So let's look at that keyword also, outputs. Output or end results. Outputs or end results. So I would like to hear from at least one person to unmute and respond whether if you are following it or not. Is I need a response from at least one person. You are following or not? I want to know. Just one person, just unmute and talk back quickly. Let's do that within a second, if possible. Okay, so Clement, you have reacted. So if you don't want to talk, you can actually use the reaction button. Okay, so let's proceed. So that's a simple definition of computer. Now let's break down these terms that I highlighted. Let's start from electronic. Electronic. Why did I use the word electronic to explain computer? I used the word electronic to tell us that computer is a device, is a machine that gets or receives its power from electricity as a source. So that is to also inform you as the user that you shouldn't purchase computer with the mindset of I am not going to what provide a power source. So if you are buying a laptop, you must bear in mind how you are going to charge the laptop. All right? Because the difference between laptop and the desktop dealers, the one that look like those days television, the difference between it is that laptop is a mobile computer, while those ones we call desktop dealers, they are stationary what? Computer. They are all computer. In fact, they have the same function. We can have a desktop computer that is more powerful than even what? Laptop. So don't get it wrong. So it depends on your nature of operation activity. Are you a mobile type of person? Then laptop is recommended for you. Or are you a stationary person? Then desktop. But the good thing is that laptop are the modern computer. In other words, you can have a table just like the way I place my laptop on this table teaching you right now. Then I can decide to hold it on my hand and then we have smaller one. So what I'm saying is that they are all computer. If you install Microsoft Word in laptop and you also install Microsoft Word in desktop dealers, the features are the same. So once you learn Microsoft Word as an application, irrespective of the system you are using it on, the functions remain the same. I hope we are following. Can I get a response from another person, not Clement? Okay.
I can hear you.
Okay. All right. Okay, so we are still trying to break it down. So that is the reason why the word electronic is used in that definition. Now let's analyze, let's break down why did I use the word device to explain the computer. Now, one of the reasons why you see today that every organization individual, irrespective of their area of studies. One way or the other, they are, using the computer, or they want to learn how to use the computer, because it's a wonderful device that can help in making work faster. So it's an object. Number one, we need to know that it's a device, it's a machine. All right. So now let's look at the meaning of data. Why did I use data? I said computer is an electronic device that can receive that can receive data. Now we need to know. You see, the what we call computer processing cycle, which means that where does it start from? What process does it go through? And where does it end? Before you can say that, yes, I have actually used the computer to produce something that I can use to solve a problem. So under the computer cycle, we have the input. The input is that point where you give what you want the computer to work on, to improve on, to transform. You must send it into the system. That is how computer is structured. And that is why when you go through some materials, they will tell you that computer operation is garbage in, garbage out. So which means that the quality of, number one, your skills, and the quality of what you give determine the outcome. So the reason why we subscribe into this fundamental training, because you want to get it right so that you have quality skills on how to instruct the computer in order to get quality end results. And these are the set of people the industries are looking for, not people who do not understand it very well. I hope I am communicating. So I'm still talking about the word data. The word data in this context is talking about raw information. It's talking about raw information. All right. So what do we mean by raw information? For example, when a company asks you to submit a letter for employment, you will first of all sit down and with your biro and paper and draft the letter. Now, after that, you will now proceed to processing that drafted copy. Now, that drafted copy is a data. Now, the one that you end up printing out and submit for that employment becomes the end result. At the same time, we can refer to it as the meaningful information. So we need to understand that one of the reasons why what we think of, consulting the computer, because number one, you have acknowledged that it can improve that information for you. It can make it look reliable. It can standardize it. It can improve the appearance of it. So when we get to Microsoft Word, you are going to see how we will learn how to process Word using different tools available on that application. The same thing to Excel, the same thing to PowerPoint. So all these, they are software tools. They are software technologies that are put in place by programmer to address different challenges, different problems individual could be facing in their various endeavors. All right, so that is data. So a simple word to explain data, just say raw facts. That settles it. So we can say that data is equals to raw facts, for those that are making notes. All right, so which means that they need to be processed before usage. So let's get that. Now, if you have taken the note, I also mentioned inputs. So let me quickly talk about input for some second. also mention what? Input. You see, when it comes to input, you will need to understand that input, we have it, we can refer to it as, in fact, let's say input means what? To give those data to the computer. Now, we now have what we call input units and input devices. So we can polish it again by saying that what? The computer input peripheral, or we can just say what? The peripheral. So in a moment, I'm going to explain why at times in some materials, they will tell you the peripheral what? Devices. So under the peripheral devices, why that word is used, peripheral, it means these are like the leg and the hand that supports your body to perform one function or the other. So that is how it is in the computer system. So there are some devices that are not playing the major role. They are there to assist, but they have their own functions. They are referred to as the peripherals. Now, this peripheral can now be divided into two arms. We have the input peripheral, and then we have the output peripheral. All right, so let's just zero on the input peripheral. So the input peripheral, these are the attachable part of computer that assists in sending information or instructions into the what? The computer system. So the processor need to receive something to work on. And those devices that are responsible for feeding the processor what to process, either in form of instructions or in form of information or data, those devices, they are called what? Input devices. Do we have any question? If you have question on what I have explained so far, you can unmute and talk to me. Are we following? I don't need to call your names if you want me to call your name. Do we have any question? Okay, so if there's no question, I will assume all is going well. So just make sure that you are taking note of the important points. All right? So now let's look at some of the example of devices we can refer to as input devices. Let's look at that. We have the mouse. So the mouse is a typical example of an input device. Why? Because the mouse, as you can see, this is the mouse pointer. So the mouse is used to send instruction, commanding instruction to the system. For example, you use the mouse to shut down the system. That is, you navigate to where the power button is, you click on it, and then you have sent what? An instruction, and then you see the computer what? Shutting down. Now, if you are also within the graphical user interface, known as the GUI, which is known as the Microsoft Windows environment, where you have those icons representing program, representing folder, representing files, you can use the mouse to coordinate them. In other words, to rearrange them, to move one icon to another location. That is why some materials will tell you that the mouse is a pointing device because of that word, mouse arrow, that helps us to point towards a specific word item within the user interface. So that tells you that the mouse is an input. Now, see, it is very practical. Any attachable device to the system that helps you to send anything into the system, not to get something out of the system, that device should be classified under what? Input. So another example of a device we can refer to as input device is the keyboard. The keyboard. Let's look at that. The keyboard. So the keyboard is an essential part of your computer system. Why? Because it is almost impossible for you to type a letter without the keyboard. Yes, I understand that you can invoke the window inbuilt keyboard, but it's not going to be as fast as when you are using the main keyboard. So keyboard is an input. Why? Because it helps us to send letters, that is alphabet or number, or even special characters like @ like underscore, question mark, and the rest of them into the application interface you are using, like Microsoft Word. So that qualifies it to be addressed as what? Input device. I hope we are following. Can I get a response from one person? Sylvia, if you can unmute, I would like to hear from those that have not really hear from, if possible. Okay. Who else do I have here? Oriva Abigail, I don't know if you can unmute and also reply if the lecture is going well with you over there. I hope we are learning something. Please, if we are not getting it, feel free to use the comment section, or you can just use the reaction button. All right. Okay, so now we are still talking about the input devices. So I've explained the keyboard. Now I would like to dwell on that keyboard for some minutes. Why? Because keyboard is very, very important. In fact, that is one part of the computer that suffers beginners a lot from experience. Sometimes beginner finds it difficult to know how to even place their fingers. They can even spend 30 minutes or maybe 2 minutes looking for where letter B is. So that keyboard is a major peripheral that we need to understand. So the keyboard has sessions. The keyboard has sessions. All right. So maybe after some time, I can just go to a browser and then fetch a keyboard so that we understand. But it's something you can research on your own. Most of the things I'm discussing in this class, there are things you can actually find out your own. All right, so keyboard is an input device. Let's get that right. All right, so the keyboard has about 3 sessions. And if you are journeying with laptop, you can be looking at your keyboard as I highlight these 3 sections based on some of the buttons I'm going to mention. So if you look at your keyboard structure, your keyboard is structured in a way that it has 3 sections. The first section is what we call the alphanumeric section. Alphanumeric section. Now, if you look at that word, alpha, number, that is what alphabet number. So which means is that section that look like a trapezium. So if you are journeying with your laptop, you can start tracing from where you have the window icon, where you have letter Z, letter A, letter Q, then 1, then take it from 2 down to where you have the equal sign, where you have the backspace, then take it from where you have the square bracket, take it to where you have the quotation, the question mark, then connect it to control, to alt, and then the space bar, the longest key. And then that area, if you draw a line, it will give you a kind of trapezium. The whole of that area constitute both numbers and what? Alphabet. That is why it is called alphanumeric section. All right? So which means that when you are typing, you can take advantage of letters and numbers, even including some special character. And if you look at that area that I also traced, you will agree with me at the top. For example, let's just pick letter 2, where you have number 2, where you have number 2. You will see @ as in at yahoo.com. You will see @ symbol at the top. And then if you go to 3, I believe you should be looking at your keyboard to check what I'm talking about. So let number 2, you see @ sign. You see something like this. Something like this. I don't want to exit my note here. You see @ if you have logged into email, that @ gmail.com, that @ sign is written at the top of 2. Now, what does that mean? It means that that key, that particular pad, you see, let me explain something here. The whole of that, why is it called keyboard? Is a board that contain what? Keypads. All right. So each button you can find on the keyboard can be addressed as a keypad. All right. So if you look at that number 2 pad, there are two functions there, the at the top and the 2 at the bottom. What does that mean? It means that that pad has two functions, just like your calculator that have second function. So what you need to know now as a beginner is that how do I alternate it? How do I get the at the top and how do I get the 2? All right. So addition we are in now. Okay, let me just type it here. If I press that 2 like this, I have just what? Number 2. But if I want to get the function at the top, then you have to hold down what we call the shift button. So if you look at the keyboard, you will see some keyboard, it may not be written there, but you see a kind of arrow pointing up. That is called the second function of the keyboard. So once you press down that button, go back and press that letter 2 again. You see that it's not giving me the word, the other function of that button. So that is the logic. For example, now let me highlight another word. If you look at your keyboard, you see the question mark where you have the question mark, the pad where you have the question mark. If you press it without holding down the shift button, what you get is a /. Then if I hold down the shift, I'll get what? The question mark. Some of these things suffers typists a lot. When you start typing on Word, you are writing a letter, you find out that there are some symbols that you don't we find it difficult to insert. But when we get to Microsoft Word, because there are a bunch of, in fact, thousands of symbols that cannot be displayed on the keyboard. So when we get to Microsoft Word, there is an aspect in Microsoft Word where I'm going to show us where you have the collection of different symbols category. Because there are times that even the one written on the laptop keyboard can be giving you another function. I don't know if anybody have experienced that, where you have question mark might be giving you the function of greater than. So because of that, that is why if you are using Word, you need to know where the symbols are what packaged, so that if you come across a laptop where the label are giving you opposite function, what you do, you go back to what, or you depend on that. So we are still trying to understand our keyboard as an essential part of the computer. All right. So now I'm still trying to break down the important ones. Remember, we are still talking about input. So all these devices that I'm calling, they are devices that helps us to send information or instruction into the computer system. All right, because computer is garbage in, garbage out. You must give something before you can get anything out of it. All right, so let's look at another. We have scanner. I believe some of us must have seen what? Scanners. Scanners are also input. They are not output. Scanner is that flat machine that most time, I think it's Clapshare. You open it and then you place maybe your certificate on it, and then it converts it from hard copy to soft copy so that you can forward it to a company that want to employ you. That is a scanner. So what you are doing indirectly, you are taking something from the outside and you are sending it into the system. So that's what makes it what? An input. So scanner is not an output device. So we also have what we call the light pen. We have the light pen. Now, sometimes this is not rare, but if you have worked in some, reputable organizations, some big firm, they you must have seen light pen. Light pen is just like pen, like this, right? It's an input device. For example, now everything I have on this screen, if I don't want to use the scanner, it has a ray of light. So once you on it, if I trace the screen, any part that I'm able to trace, it captures it in. That is the power of it. So it is not, we don't usually find it in all these small companies, all right? But it's an input device. So I'm just trying to point out some input devices. I believe I pointed almost about 4 of them now. So in that definition, I also talk about computer receiving data as an input, which we have just explained now. And then what happened after receiving the input? The next thing the computer does after receiving the input is to start transforming those inputs. Because that is the objective. There's a reason why somebody sent those things in. The reason is that they should be what? Improved. So once the computer receives the input, the next thing it does is what? It starts what? The processing. Starts the processing. So now the processing is that part of the system that contain control units. Sometimes we refer to it as ALU, arithmetic and logical what? Unit. That is the part that makes our computer to perform what? Calculation. Let's say mathematical what? Calculation. And then we have, within the processing stage, we have the processor. So the processor is the brain and the heart of the entire computer. In fact, it's the most important component you can find on the system what? Motherboard. And what is the role of the what? The processor is the one that encode and decode. Now, let me break it down. When we say encode and decode, what we are simply saying is that we say encode and what? Decode. So I'm going to use a perfect device that we all know so that you understand it. Now, in computer terminology, if I am talking to you and I say what? I encoded you an information yesterday. What I'm simply saying is that I sent you, I compose something I sent to you. And then you can also reply me, yes, I decoded it, which means that what? One is writing, the other one is what? Opening or to view. And that is why you see that your DSTV can never be encoder. Instead, what you buy is what? Decoder. Why? Because you are not the one writing those content that you watch. You are only viewing. So you are subscribing to view what they have projected into the orbit in the satellite. So you are only receiving. You are not the one generating it. All right? So the processor is the one in charge of both of them, both encoding and decoding. That is why today you can open program like Microsoft Word and be able to write documents. And then also save that document. The next day you come back, you are able to what? To retrieve it. So computer is the one that can encode and decode. Sorry, the processor. And that is why I said, in fact, if there is no processor, there can never be what? Processing. Is one of the most important elements. All right. So let's understand the what? The sequence. You supply, that is input, and then the processor takes over. And then within the processor, a lot of things could be going on. Your skill, the application you are using, the contribution of your skill matters a lot to the outcome of what the processor is going to present to you. For example, now if I'm using AutoCAD to draw a structure, so the quality of my knowledge, the skill that I have to control or to use those tools within it will determine the quality of output the processor is going to give to me. So we need to get all these things right. Now, once it finishes the processing, what happens? Then that is where our output comes in. That is where output comes in. So output means receiving those information that has been worked on or processed from the computer. And there are units, there are channels in which we receive this information. Those channels, they are called output devices, just like the way we were breaking down the one of input. For example, the VDU, the visual display unit, which we can also describe as the monitor, is a typical example of what? An output unit within the system. Because just imagine, as I'm training us right now, if the if I don't have a screen, which is called the monitor now, if I don't have this screen now, there is no way you can see what the computer is actually working on. So the VDU or the monitor is like a unit, a display unit within the entire computer system that helps us to know the performance or to measure, to see the progress, what the CPU, the central processing unit, the processor, is currently working on. Am I following, please? I would like to get response if we are following. You can use the reaction button or you can unmute and talk back to me, please.
We can hear you, sir.
Okay. What I'm actually asking is if we are following. If we are following, not just you can hear me. Are you following? Are you learning something?
Yes, sir. I'm learning a lot, sir.
Okay, good. All right. So I believe others are also learning. Okay. So outputs are those devices used to obtain the end result from the system, right? So we have the printer, which helps us to what? To convert the soft copy of those output into what? The hard copy. And then we have the projector. The projector is an output device. Why? Because the projector helps us to what? To send what you have in the system into what? Another material. So projector is an output device. And then we also have the speaker. The speaker brings out the sound, not take in the sound. So it's an output device. Then the plotter. The plotter is an output device. The plotter. Which other one again did I mention? I mentioned the VDU. I mentioned the speaker. All these are what? Output. So the plotter is that machine that we use in printing large format. Today, you go to a printing press, they have this machine that can print large material. It's not actually called printer. It's called what? Plotter. All right. So what we call printer are all those smaller printer that are usually placed on your office table, and probably those ones that can print SAV. That is the sticker. All right. Okay. So that settles what? The definition of computer. So with all this explanation, I have simplified the definition of computer, which I said is an electronic device that accepts data as an input, process the input to become the meaningful information, which can also be referred to as the output. So that settles that definition. You see, whichever angle you are looking at computer from, that definition what highlights the role of it. It highlights the function and also the core aspect. So that will now take us to our second objective from the topic I highlighted that we are going to look at in this session, being the day one of this master class that will run for 12 classes. All right, so the topic 2 we are looking at is, let's take some time to understand part of computer. So at this point, I'm going to switch to so that we can see some of these parts. All right, so that we can see them, so that I can explain better. So part of computer. Now, when we say part of computer, what are we talking about? Now, this is Aguero Prosper. The whole of me, you can describe me with one name, Aguero Prosper, just like the way we just describe the whole of this object as computer. But you and I know that Aguero Prosper is made up of hand, is made up of head, is made up of leg. So that is exactly what we want to look at now. So we just finished looking at like the entire system together. Now we want to explain each of this part. Stylishly, I have already explained some, so I don't think I'm going to spend time here. All right. So when we say part of computer, we are talking about what? Different units that comes together to make up what? The system. And all these different units, remember that computer is a goal-oriented object, which means that what? Is a machine that is built in such a way that it has an objective. And that is why when you see professional that uses computer, people who really learn it very well, just like you are doing now, they don't mount the system without identifying what they want to do. Never. You cannot see me coming on the system without first of all identify what I want to use it. I can't get to the system. That is where I'm thinking of, okay, what do I want to do? No, that is not the professional way of using the system. The computer is a goal-oriented what? Machine, which means that before you approach it, identify your goal. What are your targets? What do you want to do with it? All right. So all these parts, they are constructed to support achieving that goal. The keyboard, as one of the parts, has its own what? Function. What it should contribute to achieving the goal of what? The system. So I'm not going to start by looking at them individually. I am going to look at them from the angle of what? Grouping or group, so that we know how we can cascade it to what? Maybe a mouse. So you know which family does the mouse belong to? Which family does the keyboard belong to? Which family does MS Word belong to? So you are going to understand from the way I am going to break it down to us. All right. So let me take off this so that I want to see if I can try with the diagram. So we have the entire computer divided into three categories. Into three. So let's say this is the computer. Don't mind my digital handwriting. This is the computer. And then we are saying that this computer can be broken into three. We have the word, the computer hardware. CH here represents what? The computer hardware. And then we have the computer software. And then we have the computer humanware. We have the computer what? Human. So let me break it down for us to understand. When we say the computer hardware, we are talking about those physical parts that you can see and touch. Those physical parts you can see and touch. They are referred to as what? The hardware, which means that the mouse that we have mentioned earlier is part of what? The hardware, which means that the keyboard that we have mentioned earlier, in fact, all the output and the output peripherals that we have discussed, they can be traced towards this. So this is where you have your mouse, this is where you have your keyboard. Now, this hardware, now, if you now want to further break it down, you can now say, okay, basic hardware and optional hardware. That is still all right. All right. So under the basic hardware, it means those compulsory hardware, those hardwares that must be present. For example, the mouse, the keyboard, the video. Then when you say optional hardware, it means those ones that can be done away with for some time, like printer, scanner. You can operate your computer. For example, I'm teaching us with my sister right now, but the printer is not connected. So that is what makes them what? Optional hardware. That's what makes them optional hardware. All of them falls under, so long you can see them and touch them, they can be classified as what? Hardware. Now let's discuss what? The software. In fact, sometimes I've asked students to tell me the difference between hardware and software. Now, the moment they get to know that hardware are the physical part, sometimes they'll be tempted to say the software are the spiritual part or the part that cannot be seen. No, the opposite of hardware can never be used to describe what? Software. Now, what is software? Software means what? Instructions. Software, just like when you say Microsoft Word, is a software. Now, the whole of that Microsoft Word is actually the collection of what? Instruction, collection of commands. which we need to manage the computer or to do something for us. So the hardware is the first layer. In fact, is the surface layer, if you are taking it from human angle, because we are the last part of the computer. Then followed by the what? The application. Then followed by the what? The operating system. And then the main system at the back. So if I start from the other way around, so I have the computer layer. Then after the computer layer, I have the operating system layer. Make sure you don't miss the next session, because that is where we are going to focus on the operation of the operating system. We have the computer layer. We have the operating system layer. That's where you have your Windows, Windows 11, Windows 10, and thereabout. And then we have the what? The application layer. That is where you have your Microsoft Word, Excel, and all of them. And then finally, the user layer, which is what? You and I. All right? So we need to know that all these layers what exist. Now, let's look at it here. Software, they are what? They are command, they are set of instruction that must be installed in the hardware before the